Come listen to a story, a story, a story. Come listen to a story. It's story time. Come listen to a story, a story, a story. Come listen to a story. It's story time. Hey guys, welcome to another story time with TT Breeding at Grow With Me Educational Center. And guess what? We are reading a book today that is a true story. I said it. It is a true story. A true story. Can you guess what it is? I'll give you a second. Did you guess? You didn't. Okay. We are reading the story of Ruby Bridges. Now, friends, this book is written by Robert Coles, but I really want you to listen to this story because this story is going to tell you why your mom and dad and grandma, grandpa, and teachers are so serious about education and your education. This is why they're so serious about it. So I want you to listen in with your big, special, intelligent, inquisitive ears. I want those ears turned all the way up so you can hear why education is so very important. Let's look. Ruby Bridges was born in a small cabin near Mississippi. We were very poor, very, very poor, Ruby said. My daddy worked picking crops. We just barely got by. There were times when we didn't have much to eat. The people who owned the land were bringing in machines to pick the crops. So my daddy lost his job. And that's when we had to move. I remember us leaving. I was 4, I think. Look at her sitting, getting ready to move. In 1957, the family moved to New Orleans. Ruby's father became a janitor, and that's someone that cleans up in buildings. And her mother took care of the children during the day. After they were tucked in bed, Ruby's mother went to work scrubbing floors in a bank. Every Sunday, the family went to church. We wanted our children to be near God's Spirit, Ruby's mother said. We wanted them to start feeling close to Him from the very start. So that means that God and religion and Jesus and the Bible were really important to them. Let's keep going. This was at that time, black children and white children went to separate schools in New Orleans. The black children were not able to receive the same education as white children, and that wasn't fair. It was against the nation's law. Okay? So just like you get to go to school with everybody. White, black, Hispanic, Asian. Well, in this time, every culture went to their own school. But in 1960, a judge ordered 4 girls to go to 2 white elementary schools. 3 of the girls were sent to McDowell, 19. But guess what? 6-year-old Ruby Bridges was sent to the 1st grade in the William Franks Elementary School. She was only 6 years old, guys. 6 years old. So that's kindergarten or 1st grade, because I know some of you all are in kindergarten, some of you are in 1st grade. Could you imagine, think, what would it be like to go to a new school where you are the only one that looks like you? What would it be like? Think about it. Let's keep going. Ruby's parents were proud that their daughter had been chosen to be a part of such an important event in history. They went to church. We sat and prayed to God, Ruby's mother said, that we would be strong and we would have courage and that we would get through any trouble and that Ruby would be a good girl and that she will hold her head up high and be a credit to her own people and a credit to all the American people. We prayed long and hard. See them? They're at church praying because you need courage to do something like that. On Ruby's first day, a large crowd of angry white people gathered outside the school. The people carried signs that said that they didn't want black children in the school. People called Ruby names. Some wanted to hurt her. The city and state police did not help Ruby. They did not help. So guess what? The President of the United States ordered federal marshals to walk with Ruby into the school building. The marshals carried guns. So the city and the state would not help. They didn't want Ruby to go to school with the white children, so they would not help. But the president sent federal marshals to help. Every day for weeks that turned into months, Ruby experienced that kind of school day. She walked into the school surrounded by the marshals, wearing a clean dress, a bow in her hair, carrying her lunch pail. Ruby walked slowly for the first few blocks. As Ruby approached the school, she saw a crowd of people marching up and down the street. Men and women and children. They shouted at her. They pushed towards her, and the marshals kept them from Ruby by threatening to arrest them. Ruby would hurry through the crowd and not say a word. Look how close they were to her. All of the angry people. The white people in the neighborhood would not send their children to school. And when Ruby got inside the building, she was all alone, except for her teacher. There were no other children to keep Ruby company, to play with, to learn with, or to eat lunch with. But every day, Ruby went into the classroom with a big smile on her face, ready to get down to business with learning. She was polite and she worked well at her desk. She enjoyed her time there. She didn't seem nervous or anxious or irritable or scared. She seemed as normal and relaxed as any child I've ever taught. So Ruby began learning how to read and write in an empty classroom and an empty building. So because Ruby still had to go to that school, all of the parents, the white children's parents, they would not send their kids to school. So Ruby was by herself, guys. Sometimes I look at her and wonder how she did it, her teacher said. How she went by those mobs and how she sat by herself and yet seemed so relaxed and comfortable. The teacher would question Ruby in order to find out if the girl was really nervous or afraid, or even if she was really calm and confident. She was just confused, like, how are you doing this? But remember, Ruby's mom and her family, they prayed that Ruby would have courage, right? So we know that God gave her the courage to do that. But Ruby kept saying she was doing fine. So the teacher decided to wait and see if Ruby would keep on being so relaxed and hopeful, or if she would gradually begin to wear down or even decide that she no longer wanted to go to school. And that's Ruby and her teacher. Then one morning something happened. Miss Hurley stood by the window of the classroom as she usually did, watching Ruby walk toward the building, and suddenly Ruby stopped. Right in front of the mob of howling and screaming people, she stopped. She stood there facing all of those men and women. She seemed to be talking to them. Her teacher could see Ruby's lips moving and wondered what Ruby could be saying. The crowd seemed ready to kill her. The marshals were frightened. They tried to persuade Ruby to move along. They tried to hurry her into the school, but Ruby wouldn't budge. Then Ruby stopped talking and she walked into the school. I want you to think, why do you think Ruby stopped? Why do you think she stopped? Well, let's see. When she went into the classroom, her teacher asked, "What happened?" And Miss Hurley told Ruby that she had been watching and she was surprised when she had stopped and she was talking to the mob. Ruby became irritated. "I did not stop to talk to them," she said. "Ruby, I saw you talking. I saw your lips moving." "I wasn't talking," Ruby said. "I was praying. I was praying for them." Every morning, Ruby had stopped a few blocks away from the school to say a prayer for the people who hated her. This morning, she had forgot to stop and pray until she was in the middle of the angry mob. And so that's where she stopped to pray. When school was over for the day, Ruby hurried through the mob as usual. After she walked a few blocks and the crowd was behind her, Ruby said the prayer that she repeated twice a day, before school and after school. "Please, God, try to forgive those people, because even if they say those bad things, they don't know what they are doing. So please forgive them, just like you did those folks a long time ago when they said those terrible things about you." That was the prayer that she said every day, before school and after school. And that is how Ruby Bridges integrated the white schools. Can you all say integrated? Integrated. And all of that means is that there was a desegregation. So segregation means that there are separate parts. And back when there was segregation, the parts were whites and blacks, or coloreds, as they would call us, coloreds. And so in order to desegregate or integrate certain situations, integrate the schools and integrate restaurants and buses, they had to come together. So that's what we call a desegregation. So now we're not separate, but we go to school together. We can ride the buses together. We can travel together, and we can also work together. So friends, I want you to be conscious that even when people do not agree with what you are doing, when they do not like what you are doing, pray for them. Take one of Ruby's ideas and pray for those people who do not like you or who try to hurt you. Pray for them. Just like God did back in the Bible. He prayed for those who did not agree with him. He prayed for those who tried to hurt him. So that's the story of Ruby Bridges, and I really hope that you enjoyed it. And I will see you tomorrow for another story in Story Time. Bye.